Whenever we deal with history, it's a good idea to try and put matters into context. We're currently standing outside the building which is known to all at Waverley here today as the Grange. It was actually called Strathherne when it was bought by the brothers in 1938 to provide for boarders at the school. Interestingly enough, what had happened is that boarders were coming to the area but not actually living here at the school. They were living in dwellings provided by some of the parents. So it was a momentous decision to actually come here and open a boarding school. The Grange fulfilled that purpose quite admirably, but that's part of the evolving story as we move around the site from here. Now for a glimpse inside the Grange. Over my left shoulder is a room that we now use as a meeting room. The time when the Grange was actually bought by the brothers, they had in there the boarders' dining room. The office at the front of the building was actually a parlour where boarders could receive guests, and on the top floor, the actual bedrooms for the boys. Needless to say, it was highly inadequate. But the school found, as it has done over many years, another use for the building, and the decision was made to convert the building to residences for lay teachers who could not find accommodation nearby. So all of the rooms on the ground floor were actually partitioned off, and there were about 4 or 5 lay teachers using these particular premises. Another use for another building. We've now moved into the current library at Waverley College. This area was once a school hall, with a stage, lighting, and also, believe it or not, a cinema. On Saturday evenings, the boarders would come in here for the cinema. And directly in front of me, at what is the rear of the library, is the projection box. The school owned 2 very professional cameras, or not cameras, but projectors, and the boarders were always treated to very current films. So of a Saturday night after playing rugby or soccer, football, whatever, the boarders would be here in the library with the brothers all organised in very, very comfortable seats behind the boarders. It was also a time when the lay teachers that were living on site could come for their entertainment. We're now standing in what was originally, I suppose, a hub of the school. For Waverleyans, this particular site was known as Airmount, but in actual fact, it had originally been called Ellerslie. It was purchased for the fledgling school around about 1903, and the building was quite a magnificent one. As we look back in history, many of the homes in this area were quite substantial buildings. Airmount was no different from that. In fact, in here was the hub of the school, the tuck shop. And the tuck shop was underneath what was the first chapel built at Waverley College. The building itself was a house for the brothers, although it was used as classrooms in the early days of the school until a purpose-built building went up for classrooms. The building was demolished once we had built the main building, which is now called the main quadrangle. We would not be allowed to do that today because it would be listed as a heritage property. However, at the time, the decision did seem to be the right one because the school had expanded to such a great extent and there were literally no open areas for playing or for assembly at the school. The first actual area dedicated to classrooms is behind me at the moment. This was the first classroom purpose-built on the site. It consisted of a classroom at this end and a section in the middle there. The brothers had the foresight to ensure that the foundations of this building would be strong enough to actually put on another 2 stories above. So over the years, as the place grew, you could see another classroom being put onto the end on the ground floor, then a first floor level went in, and finally a top floor. This building actually housed most of the senior school as classrooms. At this time, the junior school was right down at the bottom of the property, now known as the recreation area. From here, when I came to my first May procession at the school, there was a suspension bridge, would you believe it, running from the top floor of Airmount straight across and linking into this building here. And there was a bridge for the brothers to walk across to get to their classrooms. The Conlon building reached its completion, obviously, at a stage when the school was expanding. The Waverley College of the 1960s contained about 1,300 to 1,400 students. The building that is up to the top of this area is now known as the Kenny Wing. Originally it was designed for a special IT area for the school. The swimming pool was actually an open paddock in the early days of the school. Where the swimming pool has its facilities for changing was actually a garage. The school owned 2 buses, which were then called parlour coaches, and the school used these to take the students to various activities. The area for them, as I said, is just down there. The whole of the rest of the site, as in the subdivisions, had actually ended up with small areas for the various houses. Brother Simmons, who was here just after Brother O'Connor left, actually had a plan to develop the site. The cadet unit, of course, had a rifle range here at the school. And every Friday afternoon, in where we are now standing, was a rifle range that could be utilised using .22 calibre rifles. They were right behind me where I am now, and in front of me was the actual target area. Fascinatingly enough, the target area consisted of a deep trench with sand in it, with a metal backing so that the bullets fired by the rifles would ricochet down into the sand. And one of the jobs that was done typically at the end of parade on a Friday afternoon was to clean up that area and actually rake up all of the spent ammunition. Boys who are now in the cadets would be interested to know that on a Friday afternoon it was typical for the unit to actually line up in Salisbury Street with the band. Traffic marshals were then deployed to the traffic pedestrian crossing, which takes us across into Waverley Oval and Waverley Park, and the cadet unit with the band playing would actually march from Salisbury Street over to the park, and we would carry out our training in that area. Of course, the whole neighbourhood came to a standstill. If we tried to do that today, I dare say there would be just a few minor complaints from the local residents. The area where the tennis courts now stands actually had all demountable classrooms in it, and that's where the junior school resided. When the new wings were opened in the main quadrangle, the junior school moved to the Conlon building, and later on, as we bought that property down in Henrietta Street, we were able to move the junior school entirely off-site. No story about Waverley College and academic excellence could possibly be told without mention of what we now call the Kenny Building. Originally it was conceived as the middle school for the school, with the junior school separated down in the demountables. This particular building here as years 8, 9 and 10, and then 11 and 12 at the top of the hill. The Kenny Building as we now know it was named after Bede Kenny VC, an ex-student of Waverley College who won the Victoria Cross in the First World War. The name commemorates his great achievement. This War Memorial Chapel was opened in 1956. It's part of the heart of the spiritual nature of this school. On the eastern side of the chapel are the memorial windows, depicting the actual wars that Australia has fought in, hence the name War Memorial Chapel. On the eastern walls of the chapel near the sanctuary are the plaques in memory of staff who have died while they were teaching at Waverley College. Behind me on the western wall, however, is the wall which is dedicated to those students of Waverley College who died while they were here at the school. To build this whole area, the east and the north wing, the whole top of the hill was raised and all of the fill from that area was carted out of the college. In 1940, the building behind me was actually constructed, purpose-built for the boarding community. The completion of the quadrangle itself occurred in 1963. The leaving certificate class of 1963 had to tolerate massive disruption and building noise for the whole year of their leaving certificate. The building was opened at the end of 1963 and was fully operational in 1964. In 1970, where we were just briefly in the middle school or Kenny quadrangle, that particular area was opened. At the same time, the swimming pool was completed, and it was opened by the Prime Minister at the time, John Gorton. This centenary quadrangle has seen many interesting events: graduations, assemblies, back to Waverley days, and a very ceremonial place at the centre of the college. There have been some other rather interesting events held here too. The cadet unit, for example, held a tattoo here in the quadrangle for 2 years. It was held under floodlights and consisted of cadets, one of their acts, actually abseiling down the north wing and hitting the ground abseiling. We also what was called the death slide. This consisted of a cable attached to the balustrades on the 4th floor, stretching across the quadrangle and ending up where the covered way is. An intrepid person in the cadet unit would then get onto the rope at the top of it and, arms outstretched, slide down towards the covered way with sparklers in each hand, much to the applause of the audience. So, as you can see, all sorts of things have happened here.